Join me on a visit to Edinburgh Castle. Lots to see, and the firing of the 1 o'clock gun coming up. Edinburgh Castle, sitting on top of Castle Rock, dominates the Edinburgh skyline. Let's join a tour that's just starting.
So from around the 11th century right through to the 17th, Edinburgh Castle becomes a royal stronghold where the Scottish monarchy would have felt safe and protected. The last time a king spent the night in this castle, we've got to go all the way back to the year 1633, and that's when King Charles I spent the evening here on the eve of his Scottish coronation. However, when this royal period comes to an end, the castle takes on a purely military role. Now, no other castle in Britain has been attacked more times than Edinburgh. I think there's been something in the region of 23 major sieges here throughout the centuries. However, no attacking army ever succeeded in destroying the gates and the walls and taking possession of the castle. So Edinburgh Castle has only ever been captured after siege situations. As you were walking over the castle drawbridge heading towards the entrance, some of you might have noticed two statues, one on either side of the castle entrance, two very important Scots. On the left hand side we have King Robert the Bruce, and on the right hand side we have William Wallace, the Scottish independence freedom fighter. These are two of the most important characters in Scottish history, and yet strangely enough we have no official record that either of these men ever set foot in this castle. Now here we are at the Argyll Battery, and this is also known as the 6-gun battery, and these 6 cannon along here, these have never been fired from Edinburgh Castle at any point during their stay here. These cannon arrived here in the early 1840s. That would have been about 100 years after the castle was last involved in any form of military conflict. The last time Edinburgh Castle was attacked was actually in 1745, and that was by Bonnie Prince Charlie and his Jacobite army. So these 18-pound cast iron muzzle-loaded cannon only came here purely for decorative purposes. Now getting back to the castle over here, this building dates from the early 1600s, used to simply be known as the cart shed. This is where all the supplies to the castle would be brought, unloaded and stored. There would have also been stables in there. It's now become the most important building in the castle because this is where you'll get a coffee, a cup of tea or a beer, and you'll also find washrooms situated at the rear of the building that serve this middle ward of the castle. Down this road here, this will take us to the Scottish National War Museum. Terrific museum covering around 400 years of Scottish military history and well worth a visit. Also down there's a viewing platform that will give you wonderful views to the west of Edinburgh, and that's the only point in the castle that you'll get these westerly views. We're now standing in what I'd class as the military quarter of the castle. Even though it's been around 100 years since regiments were permanently based here, Edinburgh Castle is still classed as a military base. You're more than welcome to visit over in the corner of the barracks, where you'll find a regimental museum, and this is the home of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, a very old Scottish cavalry regiment. And one of the highlights that you'll find in there are the French colours that were captured at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 by one of the sergeants of this regiment, a man called Sergeant Charles Urt. He became a national hero after this event. He was promoted to the rank of ensign, and amongst the honours that he was given, probably one of the greatest that you can receive in Scotland, is to have a pub named after you. So you might have noticed at the top of the Royal Mile the Ensign Urt pub. Over here we have another regimental museum. This is the home of the Royal Scots and the Royal Regiment of Scotland. And the Royal Scots are Britain's oldest infantry regiment. They were formed way back in the 1600s. Well, welcome to Crown Square, everyone. Probably the most important part of the castle, certainly the heart of the castle, and this is where the early Stuart monarchs resided during their time in power. I'd just like to tell you about the building to the north of the square first of all. Now, this is a very important building in Scotland. This is the Scottish National War Memorial. The main part of the building is a hall which is called the Hall of Honours, and the Hall of Honours is divided into regimental bays, each Scottish regiment having its own bay. And in each bay you'll find 2 books. The book on the left hand side lists the names of all those soldiers from that particular regiment who were killed during the First World War, and the book on the right covers all the regimental casualties from the Second World War and right through to the present day. So even now, if a Scottish soldier is killed in action, his name would be entered into his respective regimental book. So this is very much a building that Scottish people will visit to pay respects to family members, friends and loved ones who have lost their life serving their country over the last 100 years. And I'm sure you'll agree when you step inside, it's an absolutely stunning building and certainly a fitting tribute. Now to the south of the square and right behind me here, we have the Great Hall. The Great Hall was built in 1511 during the reign of King James IV of Scotland, and this was built around the time of his marriage to Margaret Tudor. Margaret Tudor was the sister of King Henry VIII, so this was known as the marriage of the thistle and the rose. That's why you'll see the Scottish thistle and the English Tudor rose on the pipework around the square. Now I'm pleased to say the Great Hall still sees a lot of high profile use, and to this day it is still used for government functions and royal and state occasions as well. Now over to the east we have the Royal Palace. This dates from the early 1600s, and the door at the bottom of the clock tower, that leads to the Crown Room, and in the Crown Room you'll find the Scottish Crown Jewels, and these are Britain's oldest surviving set of Crown Jewels. Now very briefly, the building to the west, the Queen Anne building, early 1700s, built originally as accommodation for officers. It is now the Queen Anne Tea Room, so if you're looking for a nice cup of tea, that's where you'll find one. Throughout the castle, photography is welcome, but there are two exceptions. The first being the interior of the War Memorial, purely out of respect for the nature of the building, and the Crown Room for security reasons. Let me introduce you to a gun that is fired on a regular basis, and is of course Edinburgh's famous 1 o'clock gun, and that's it right over there. And the 1 o'clock gun fires every day except Sundays, Good Friday and Christmas Day, so the gun will be fired today. And the gun that you see there, it's a 105mm gun, still used by the British Army today. And if this gun was used in combat, it would have a range of somewhere in the region of 14 miles. However, the story of the 1 o'clock gun, or earlier versions of it, go way back to the year 1861, when it was first introduced as a time signal for the ships out on the River Forth there, because in those days the ship's clocks or chronometers, they weren't very accurate and they tended to lose or gain time every day, and of course it's vital for shipping to have accurate timekeeping to help with navigation. So the ship's captains asked Edinburgh to provide a time signal. Now there was a time signal introduced 8 years earlier before the gun, and it was actually called the time ball, and the time ball still also operates to this day. We can actually see it from here. It's right across at Calton Hill there. Now the tower on Calton Hill that looks a little bit like an upside down telescope with a cross on the top, it's actually called the Nelson Monument, and you may be able to make out at the top of the tower there is a black ball. Now at 2 or 3 minutes to 1 o'clock, that ball rises to the top of the mast, and the second 1 o'clock arrives, the ball comes tumbling down. So this was the original time signal way back in the day. Ship's captains round about 1 o'clock would train their telescopes on that tower, or on seeing that happen, they could quickly then reset their clocks. The problem with that time signal was though that because we're on the coast, we do get a lot of fog and sea mist, so on many occasions the ships couldn't even see Calton Hill. And that's why 8 years later the gun was introduced to provide an audible signal as well. And both these signals have just continued to operate over the years just to carry on this tradition. There's always a few questions we get asked about the gun. Unfortunately, the most common one being, what time does a 1 o'clock gun get fired? Which we'll hear 2 or 3 times a day. Another good question we'll get is, where does the shell land once the gun's been fired? Well, of course it is just a blank shell. I think the citizens of Leith down there would be a little bit nervous if it was a real one. However, I do know that there is a guide here that will tell people that the island of Inchkeith out there used to be twice the height, and every day it gets a little bit smaller. And now at this point it's time for me to let you all go and explore. So a big thanks to you all for coming along. I wish you all a happy visit to the castle and to Edinburgh, and thanks a lot for your company over the last 30 minutes. Have a great day.
Be sure to subscribe for more Scotland in 4K videos. I publish a new video every week. Have you been to the location featured in this video? Perhaps you'd like to leave a comment for other visitors. Just do so in the section below. Finally, if you'd like to watch more 4K videos, just select one of the thumbnails. Thanks for watching, see you again.